All right, we're going to get started. I'll give people a second. Ready, we're ready. All right. I will call the St. Paul City Council to order. Roll call.
Tao.
Here.
Tolbert. Yang.
Here.
Jalali.
Here.
Naker.
Here.
Prince.
Here.
Council President Brenmoen.
Here.
Consent agenda item.
Oops, one moment. So we have 7 present, and if folks would like to please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge we have a nice full house today. That's fun for the council. It's still, lots of weeks where we have nobody in the chamber, so when we have a full house, it's wonderful. As you know, the mask mandate has been lifted in the building, and our public health director says, please keep wearing your mask. And others are saying you don't have to anymore, so it is your choice. But we have, there are several members of the council that are continuing to wear their masks. And again, the public health director thinks that's the best idea possible. We will ask, though, that when you're at the microphone, please make sure that we can hear you. You might even just look up to me and I'll give you the thumbs up or thumbs down to make sure that we can hear. We have had some problems with just being able to hear folks that are speaking. So thank you, welcome. We have some fun items on our agenda here, so we will get started.
Consent agenda items 4 through 12 are before you for your consideration.
Anything on consent that needs to be taken separate? Looks like there is not, so Mr. Tolbert moves consent. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The consent agenda is adopted. Item number 13 is before you for discussion. Resolution 22-609, recognizing Chris Ryder's career with the City of St. Paul and congratulating her on retirement.
All right. Mr. Tolbert, let's kick things off.
Chris, I think you need to come and join me. Chris Ryder, I should say. I see a few Chris's in that Ryder. Well, thank you. I get the great honor of reading this resolution on behalf of the St. Paul City Council. And I first want to thank Sherry Moore, who really wanted to be here and unfortunately had circumstances where she can't be, but she was indispensable in helping put this together. So I just want to recognize that since she isn't sitting there normally, although it's good to see you, Tom. Whereas Chris spent her early years in St. Paul's Rice Street neighborhood and where she made lifelong friends, and whereas Chris learned about public service in childhood as the daughter of a City of St. Paul firefighter, and whereas Chris has been an indispensable team member of a variety of departments with the City of St. Paul and has an intrinsic knowledge of how the city operates, and whereas Chris started her career with the City of St. Paul in 1987 at the St. Paul Police Department as a police stenographer, and whereas Chris moved to the City Council offices in 1989, continuing her career as a member of Council Research, and whereas Chris then worked as an executive assistant in Ward 5 for council members Carl Nide and Marie Grimm, and next transitioned to the Ward 3 office, working with council members Mike Harris and Pat Harris. And whereas Chris was appointed to Mayor Chris Coleman's administration in 2006 as scheduler and was appointed to Mayor Melvin Carter's administration in 2018 as a senior aide to Deputy Mayor Jamie Tincher. And whereas Chris has been a tireless volunteer, giving her time to serve the board of Twin Cities Academy, Girl Scouts, Urban Wilderness Canoe Adventures, Spare Key Foundation, serving our troops, and multiple Habitat for Humanity projects throughout the city. And whereas Chris exemplifies hard work and public service, showing us that beyond the walls of City Hall, she continues to make a difference in our community, as she was honored for that service by receiving the Carl Nide Award in 2014. And now, therefore, be it resolved that that the St. Paul City Council thanks Chris Ryder for her many years of dedicated public service to the people of St. Paul, and be it further resolved, in honor of Chris's years of public service in the city of St. Paul, April 22nd, 2022 will be known as Chris Ryder Day in the city of St. Paul. Congratulations. And I know we have a few other people coming up. Chris.
Welcome, Mayor Carter.
Council President, thank you very much. Council members, every day I show up somewhere in the city and I share some unique reason why I'm particularly glad to be wherever I am at that point in time. I am displeased to share that I'm displeased to be here right now because we have received this retirement over all of my objections. But it's an honor to be here to honor somebody who I've known for a very long time as a colleague, as a friend, as a mentor, as a teacher, as a navigator of sorts, and sort of as many, many things. We really appreciate your literally life of commitment to this city, Chris. It's been incredible to know you as a member of the staff of our former mayor of St. Paul. It's been incredible to know you as a city council member working with that office, and it's been very incredible. I'll forever be grateful to you for staying on and helping us to figure out where the bathrooms are and helping us to figure out our way around City Hall when we came into the office just over 4 years ago. It really means a lot to me. As we have, I'll share, I look at Chris Ryder every couple of months or so, and I go, you sure you don't think we're all crazy? Right? But it's been a real blessing. One of the things I know that we all admire about our city employees is the way they go above and beyond every day for us, the way in which that, we have challenges and crises that happen in this city, and whether they happen at 8 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or 6 o'clock on a Saturday, Chris Ryder and so many of our other city employees are just there to help our city through and help our community through. And I can attest to you, but I know I don't need to because this room is full, because we can all attest ourselves the extent to which Chris Ryder has modeled that exemplary service. I too have a proclamation, but you had a resolution. I have a proclamation. But I also have a good friend of mine, another person who is a mentor and a friend of mine for a very long time, who today would be incomplete without. Are there any former mayors in the room, please?
I love playing with these microphones because I know you're not supposed to.
We love to have people read the sign in front of them.
That's right. What does this say? Don't adjust it, Mike. Okay. Council President Bren Moen, members of the council, I am Chris Coleman, resident of the west side of St. Paul. I too am, it's a bittersweet day for the city of St. Paul to be here to honor Chris Ryder, because it is not often that we have anymore a person that begins their career at such a young age, works their entire career for a passion and a mission that she loves for the city of St. Paul. And it's really rare that a person can go as long as Chris Ryder has, suppressing her inner Rice Streeter, to be able to get along with people, because you know exactly about half the time what she really wants to say is not what she can say publicly or even privately. And so that is part of who she is, and it's we should remember that. And I also love the fact that she is not only a daughter, but she's a daughter-in-law of firefighters, and is very proud of that. Joe's dad and Chris's dad worked together on the department. I wish I could go back. People say, if you could go back anywhere in time, where would you like to go? Would you like to go meet Abraham Lincoln? Would you like to go back? I go, no, I want to go to Ryder's wedding, I want to see what it was like to be at the wedding of 2 firefighter children, because I understand it was quite spectacular.
It was an open bar for a reason.
There was an open bar, and I understand there was a stacking of mini bottles of beer that went quite high against the wall, and I'm very proud of that fact, but I just would like to have been at that moment. But I have to say that the thing about Ryder, and I just realized that she had a first name, was that Chris wasn't my scheduler. Chris was an extension of my family. She protected Connie and me and the kids against all kinds of things. I once said to her, I said, how in the hell do things like this get on my schedule? And she said, would you like to see the things that don't get on your schedule? And more importantly, if you don't be quiet, they will be on your schedule. And I said, enough said. Rice Streeter was just starting to come out. But there were so many times where Chris's first call was to Connie to say, what's the story, is this okay to do this because I know you have this event here, or you're with your family. And I have to tell you, in the 12 years that I worked side by side with Chris, I don't know how I could have gotten through those 12 years without her dedication, without her just extreme professionalism. How many times did I go out into the community and people said to me, we were dealing with this Chris Ryder and trying to get you on an event. And I said, oh, good, when is it? And she said, and the person would say, well, no, you can't make it. But she treated me with such respect in her saying no. And I have to tell you that for a mayor, to have people kind of feel good about the fact that you're not going out to do what they want you to do is really amazing. But that was her professionalism. I also want to extend, I got a call from Pat Harris, who wishes he could be here today. He's out in New York working on some library issues, as he always does. Interestingly enough, this is the first time Pat Harris has talked to me in nearly 20 years. Because when he found out I was stealing Ryder from his office, he was so mad at me, and he's an Irishman. He does not forget. He has not forgotten the grudge. He is still mad at me to this day that I took Chris Ryder from his office, because she's just that damn good. Chris has been a true public servant. She is a friend. She is forever a member of my family. Her family is my family. Chris, we love you dearly. Congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you so much.
As I stand here amongst the 3 Chris's, that's right. As Mayor Coleman was mentioning being a member of the family, it strikes me in my transition phase after I first got elected mayor, Sakina and I met with Chris and Connie, who sat down and had lunch, and I sort of started just asking Mayor Coleman a bunch of questions, and Sakina and Connie started having a conversation about what life is like, and we got in the car after the luncheon, and my wife says, it was interesting, I learned a lot. And I was like, what did you learn? She said, we have to keep Chris Ryder. It's a true story. We have a proclamation. Care to join me? We have argued over whether this is the first time in the history of the city of St. Paul. One of us says it's not. One of us says that it is. The one of us that is the current mayor will win the disagreement. That's all right. But we have a joint proclamation in honor of you, Chris. And it says, whereas over the course of the St. Paul's 168-year history, our city has been ushered forward by the work of members of our community who have engaged in making it a place where people want to live, work, grow, and thrive. And whereas throughout these 16 decades, our city government workers have been foundational partners in this work, and whereas among our incredible city workers, there are those whose service has had an immeasurable impact, not only on our residents, workers, businesses, and visitors, but even more so on their fellow colleagues, whose success reaches greater heights because of their support, engagement, and unwavering commitment to the values we hold dear in St. Paul. And whereas Chris Ryder's 35 years of service with the city of St. Paul places her among these select few and embodies the spirit of what it means to be a public servant in our community. And whereas her service in our St. Paul Police Department as a stenographer, her decade with the City Council, first as a researcher, then executive assistant to 3 City Council members, scheduler to former Mayor Chris Coleman in his first 3 terms, and most recently her service as senior aide to Deputy Mayor Jamie Tincher in the administration of Mayor Carter, all reflect her indispensable and unparalleled capacity to serve our community. And whereas as Chris transitions to the next season of her life and work, she leaves a lasting legacy and countless colleagues whose lives and work have been enriched by her presence. And whereas at least 2 St. Paul mayors and 1 deputy mayor disagree with and protest her transition, and whereas nonetheless, we join all those who have had the great fortune to know and work alongside Chris, along with all those in our community, in thanking her for her service and in offering gratitude of our entire city. Now therefore we, Mayor Melvin Carter and former Mayor Chris Coleman, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 22nd, 2022 to be Chris Ryder Day in the city of St. Paul.
Wow. Here, we'll do it this way.
Yes. Thank you.
I guess speak.
And I know,
Turn
it's not. It's not. We have a few people up here who may or may not have a few words to share before we turn the floor over per your request. Chris Ryder is going to close us up here today, but if council members have anything they'd like to add, there's definitely been a lot of wonderful things said here today, so no pressure, but if folks want to chime in, looks like Ms. Prince is ready.
Yeah, Chris, when I thought about you leaving, and now when I look out over this esteemed group who will agree with what I'm about to say, the word linchpin came to mind. And I thought, I'm going to say that Chris is the linchpin, and if we pull her out of the organization, but first, before I used the word, I looked it up, and it said, a person or thing vital to an enterprise or organization. So that worked. And then secondly, it said, a pin passed through the end of an axle to keep a wheel in position. And I thought, uh-oh, if we pull Chris out of here, we're going to just go spinning out of control. So hopefully that won't happen. But I just want to say that you're that central in all the years I've spent down here, including going back a few years when I was a council aide. You have been a person that made things happen, that took care of a lot of things behind the scenes, who worried about us and looked out for us, and then in the mayor's office, helping those wonderful mayors and our amazing deputy mayor run the city. And it's clear just how important you are. So thank you, and we'll miss you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Ms. Yang.
Thank you. Chris, it was so touching hearing everyone's stories about how their experiences with you were over the years. And I feel like, for me, it's just so powerful to be able to hear that. Like, this wasn't just a job for you. It was, you've built a family here, you built a community here. And I hope that when you look at the people in the room, you see this as kind of like your Avengers force who you helped shape the city with. And it's so incredible. And I'm blown away by all of your work. I feel like there's so much that I and so many people still have to learn from you, because you are a bookcase of wisdom, intelligence, and institutional knowledge for our city. And so I want to say thank you so much for your years of service to the city of St. Paul. And I hope that we get to continue seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. Chris, there's so many things to say about you. I'm going to miss you so much. But I think that the times that come back to me are, the bulk of our interactions have been when I've been sitting on that very uncomfortable bench waiting to see a mayor or a deputy mayor. And when you're waiting to see a mayor or a deputy mayor, it's not a very comfortable time. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking and a little intimidating, and you don't feel very good about yourself often in those moments, and whether you're a council member or not. And you always made me feel comfortable and important and good about myself long before I was a council member and afterwards, and you do that for everyone. And if you can do it in that situation before you're going to go in and see a mayor or a deputy mayor about something, you do it all the time. So really, you'll be so missed. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Jalali.
This is so moving. Thank you so much for everything, Chris. I will always remember something Deputy Mayor Tincher said to me about being a staff member. And she said, sometimes you're a missionary and sometimes you're a mercenary. So sometimes you're making sure people know the good word and that they're all in. And sometimes you're a mercenary. You're like, you're done. And and I'm scared of you, Chris, because I don't know which one you were this whole time, but you handled it. And
The second half of that has got a lot easier over the past few years.
I'm like, it's like the CIA over here. So I just, I imagine that as you enjoy your retirement and the city that you love and that you've worked so hard for, that as you travel through the streets and visit the people you love, that you can point to things and say, I had a hand in building that. I had a hand in shaping that. And so my wish for you in this time of rest is that you really get the time to take in all of the things that are true now in our community and that are standing and either still standing or newly standing, right, because of all the things that you were able to do. I'm very moved by your example. I hope to emulate more of your example. I tend to find that I am really motivated by people who are more calm and thoughtful and tend to hold their emotions inward. And I think that's maybe because I'm a fire sign and I'm an Aries and I'm a loud, angry brown woman and I have all these other personality tendencies that are the opposite of that. And so I just, I find so much to follow in your leadership, and you truly deserve this esteemed group of people here to celebrate you. I think there's kind of, one way to do it. It's either you go out so big that people just can't bring themselves to come to your ceremony because it's like, dang, she really did that. Or it's that the whole city and then some come out. You're clearly the latter, and you're clearly so formidable. So congratulations, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Mr. Chow.
Thank you, Council President. Chris, thank you so much for your service to the city of St. Paul. And, as I'm listening to both mayors talk about their experience working with you, and I thought to myself, well, what would it be like if we didn't have a Chris Ryder? What kind of mess we'd be in, right? So really thank you for your service, and for you to serve both mayors and council member. It's a great testimony to your ability to work with everybody across the city, different departments, and the constituents, and your attention to detail. I know that scheduling, if we had to do our own scheduling, I think it would be very complex. And so I admire your passion for the city, and I wish you well and good luck in your next endeavor. And we talk about the other organizations that you work with, and it takes a lot to do the hard work you do with the city, and then to go beyond that and to serve on different boards and to make sure that young people in our communities are well taken care of and well served. So thank you so much for your leadership and your service to St. Paul.
Thank you.
So Councilmember Tolbert opened us up, and I'm going to wrap and then turn the microphones fully over to you, maybe against my better judgment. But just wanting to echo what I've heard the mayors say, what I've heard my colleagues say, what I've heard many people say is thank you sincerely for your service and dedication to the city of St. Paul and to the community that you've created here. The work over 3 decades, it adds up. And I encourage you in your retirement to do a drive-about. Go get in your car, maybe get in the passenger seat so you can truly take note of all of the things, the improvements in the city that you have had a hand in. And I think you'll be utterly amazed, because even just the amount of time that I've been here, I'm thinking about the Saints Ballpark and the Palace Theater, and just there's so many things that have evolved in your time that you have played a role in, and it's truly amazing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
St. Paul is better because of you. I do want to say that I, for one, am really looking forward to you being able to unleash your inner Rice Streeter. I've been longing for that day for
She's
a
been
decade.
caged for a little while.
Yeah, it's my turf, it's my territory. So I know that Rice Streeter way, and I love it. And so I'm looking forward to it, and you have earned it. So thank you so much. It is Chris Ryder Day here in the city of St. Paul, and we will come party with you in a little bit. But for now, know that we are grateful. You've filled up a room with people who have wonderful smiles on their faces because we all appreciate your service. And without further ado, I will turn the microphones over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Council President Bredmon, council members. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of the kind words. You really know how to make someone feel special, so thank you. When I think about the path that I've walked for the last 35 years, it makes me realize how much I have to be thankful for. I mean, this is going to bring tears to my eyes. When I started in 1987, I really never thought this would be the end of this road. Angie Steenberg out in the audience. This is our temporary job, by the way. How's your temporary job going, Angie? Is it going well? Awesome. I never thought that this would be a path that I would take, but here it is. And I took that path and kind of wound the bends, and I was offered new opportunity pretty much at every corner, and for that I am just eternally grateful. I have so many people to thank. My crew of lifelong friends that I made at the police department, thank you for being here. I couldn't be here without you, so thank you for that. For your friendship, for your time, for just being who you are and bringing what you bring into my life. Thank you. For the city council, former council member Carl Nide, who not everybody got a chance to know, but Carl had the strangest laugh and walk ever, and he just had such a kind heart. And it was just great to be with him back then. Followed by council member Murray Grimm, the two Harris brothers, Mike and Pat, along with the other staff that all went with all of that. I am truly grateful for all of their friendship and partnership throughout the years. In the mayor's office, Mayor Coleman and I met when he was a council member, and our offices were right next door to each other, so that's where we got to develop a friendship. And he took a chance and gave me a job a number of years ago, and I'm so grateful for that, so thank you. Mayor Carter, Deputy Mayor Tincher, all of the Carter staff, all of our administration and leadership team, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I have learned so much from each of you, and I appreciate that. None of this is possible without family. So my husband, Joe, can you wait? is out there. My daughter, Holly, is running late from her job. Nothing's possible without them. My daughter, Dana, lives out in Reno, Nevada, where she's pursuing a MFA. She is hopefully listening online now. So thank you, Dana. I love you from the bottom of my soul. Holly and all of the extended Ryder family. We talked about my dad. My dad wanted to be here. He's 91. He has a hard time getting around finally. He's only 91. As has been said, he is a retired St. Paul firefighter, as is my father-in-law, as is Joe's grandfather. So it goes back generations. There's a story about Joe's grandfather training in my dad back in the day. So a little bit of connection, a little bit of Ryder and Serapholian connection. I did a little Rice Street math while I've been listening, and through both sides of my family is 150 years of time. So we have a strong commitment to St. Paul. Joe and I aren't going anywhere. We're going to stay living on the east side. We're going to be east side residents versus west side residents. I'm thrilled to be adding that to my repertoire of titles. As to retirement, I'm going into it with a very light heart, ready to take on whatever comes my way. I'm going to enjoy sleeping in every day, I'm not going to lie. I am not a morning person anymore. I've got a few things on the horizon with my dad, helping him with a few things and getting some house projects, get ready for the honey-do list, because you're going to have me around a lot more to add to that list. I'm hopeful, like you said, Council President, to get to know St. Paul even better through those different passenger eyes. I'll take that absolutely to heart. And I'll be watching and cheering you all from not very far away. Be well. Thank you very much.
Just to make sure, I'll take a motion from Mr. Tolbert. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 14 is now before you.
Mr. Tolbert moves suspension of the rules. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
Suspension item SR 22-74 is before you. A St. Paul Police Department update on event security costs.
Great. All right, we're shifting gears a little bit. We are, I think in response to some questions that we had received following a newspaper article about police costs and events, we invited Deputy Chief Murphy here to come speak with us today to understand changes in police policy and also maybe to set the record straight with some facts and information so that people who are planning events or looking forward to fun events know what is the lay of the land in front of them, and just to, again, to clarify the record a little bit in terms of what are changes to our police charges for events. So welcome, thank you for being here on short notice. I know we had questions and thought that it would be best to just go straight to the source and get an answer, so we appreciate you being here today. Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you, Council President Brenmoen, council members. Like was mentioned, I'm Stacy Murphy, Deputy Chief with the St. Paul Police Department. As folks may know, there was a newspaper article that there was an event that was going to be planned here in the city, and the newspaper article stated that the costs for police services were between $75,000 and $100,000, and so that was kind of the nexus for me coming here. So again, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to come and kind of clear up some of those misunderstandings. So that particular event I'm going to talk about very briefly. So one of the organizers of that event did reach out to our department. They had not given us an actual event to take a look at, and that's what we use in order to give someone an estimate of police services. And so since we didn't have that, we had a very brief conversation with them on the phone to give them kind of an overview of what that could look like. So how we do that is we base it off of some best practices that are around the country, and that's what we use as a starting point for an event. So what that best practices looks like, again, this is talking for police personnel specifically at an event, is it really bases on whether or not there's alcohol served at an event or not. So a very basic calculation is if there will be an alcohol at an event, we have roughly 1 police officer per every 250 individuals. If there's not alcohol at an event, it would be 1 police officer for every 500 individuals. And the way that's calculated is at a peak time during that event. So throughout the course of the event, maybe it's in this case, it was a 2-day event. They were estimating roughly 30,000 people. That's not the number we base it off of. So it's what is that peak number at any given time throughout the event. That's how we would come up with those numbers. And again, that's a very rough starting place. So then we really work one-on-one with that event. So that's if people take one thing away from this, it would be to give us a call when you start planning an event, when you start kind of thinking about having that event, so we can have some of these conversations one-on-one. That's how we really dig in and figure out what the true cost of an event will be. So we look at a whole variety of things. Are there road closures? How many road closures? The size of the event. Again, if there's alcohol, any other things that would be done like fencing, security. There's a wide variety of things that throughout our conversations we'll figure out what that true police cost will turn out to be. And in this case, those conversations weren't had, so the calculations were just not accurate. So that really is the best thing to do, is to give us a call. Really what we try to do is to work with the organizers to ensure a safe event. Us, just like I'm sure the entire council, really want to have events in the city. There's a huge benefit to the city folks coming into the city to really showcase the great city that we have, and we want to be a good partner in that. And part of that, and the main part from the police department standpoint, is to ensure a safe event. Tragically, there's things that happen at large events throughout the country. I'm sure we all can remember back in November of last year, the Christmas parade over in Wisconsin, where an SUV drove through the parade, killing several people and injuring over 60 individuals. Those are the kinds of tragedies that we work really, really hard to try to mitigate and hopefully not have at all. And we've been very good in the city, and that's why we do have a very high standard. But again, working one-on-one with events to give them alternatives. You know, if we have a starting place with an event where the cost seems really high to them, we work with the event very closely to help bring those costs down by those mitigation factors I had talked about earlier. So that's kind of the gist of what we do. Again, the biggest thing is to reach out and work directly with us. That's how we can help, you know, not have these kinds of confusions in the future, because we really do want to be a good partner and ensure that there's events in the city.
Thank you for that. And I think the conversations were just like, we want safe events. We want people to feel safe. We want people to be safe. But at the same time, we don't want our security to be so extreme that events can't even happen. And it sounded to me when we checked in earlier this week with the police department that the event that you're talking about would have cost closer to $12,000, not $100,000 as was published. And I think that the difference between those two numbers is really the conversation around what is the peak number of people that will be here at any given time. Are there ways, I know like for one example is parades are particularly challenging and expensive because you shut off a road for maybe a mile or further, and that can be more expensive. So shortening a route can help save dollars for an event, or changing to a static event in one location might be an option for events that were one time a parade, and maybe now going forward it would be, you know, smarter, safer, and more fun to have it all in one location. But that the police department is, I'm happy to work with event planners to mitigate those expenses and try to find that balance between keeping the attendees and the participants safe, and at the same time making sure that we don't thwart events from happening. And I know there are some events that come to the city that have more resources. They might charge an admission. There may just be more dollars available to cover expenses. You mentioned, you know, there's more police security required with alcohol, but usually there's sales that go along with that can help cover those expenses. I know this council, particularly Councilmember Yang and Councilmember Prince, had been approached right before COVID with concerns about, you know, expenses exceeding what events were able to pay in order to still have the event, and talking about putting together some sort of a program to help support those smaller events and make sure that in cases where there weren't those admission charges or other ways, sponsors or other ways to generate those revenues, that we would still be able to have a smaller community event. And so this is a great opportunity to renew that conversation. I think we were talking about it, and then COVID. And the idea of having a bunch of people all together drinking beer in a small enclosed area was not as fun of an idea as it was 6 months earlier. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to also renew that conversation as well. So I do appreciate you being here. It looks like there's a few questions. Councilmember Tolbert, Councilmember Jalali, and Councilmember Yang, and Ms. Prince.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Just a few things, and I think the advice that you gave of contacting the police department and working through the different options and different ideas and ways to bring down costs. Can you hear me?
Okay.
I've been told I'm not talking loud enough, so I'm working on it. It's true, and one of the things that I know when Grand Ole Days was first announced to be canceled back in 2019, I believe the year was, I sat with members of the police department and the GABA board, and we worked through some of the issues and different ways to save money and different ways to bring down the costs. And I think that's one of the things that I would recommend a lot of event organizers think about doing is having those conversations, because unfortunately, because of the acts of people, the violent acts of people, whether it's using a car like a vehicle or like a weapon or other things, we have to protect for those. And as Council President Bredmoen pointed out, a parade has a lot of intersections that need to be closed when it happens, or an event the length of Grand Ole Days or something like that has a lot of intersections that need to be closed and secured throughout the event time. So I would recommend people sit down with police department staff to go over these costs rather than just assuming. I know I've talked to a couple other organizations that had events, and we're like, well, maybe we can move you onto a field or a park or do something where we can cut down the costs and just put it in an enclosed area. And I think that's one of the things that going forward we can continue to look at, but I would recommend people do that, because I know it's, obviously we want these events to happen, but we also don't want a tragedy to happen in our city either. And I know that's what I suspect you lose sleep over, and others lose sleep over as you're planning the events. So thank you.
Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. I really appreciate the points made by Council President Bredmoen about just what we're trying to do here, and was personally very concerned by multiple festivals that represent major communities of color in our city, finding these costs to be prohibitive. Those festivals are not just about identity, belonging, community celebration, important cultural traditions, but also economic development and the ability for vendors and visitors to the city to come here, be able to spend money experiencing like local crafts, local food, things like that. So, I'm hearing that our council is pretty interested and increasingly united around finding a solution to improving what our policy is. I understand that there will be situations where we need a smart and targeted police presence. I represent and live right near, I represent the neighborhoods surrounding Allianz Field, and I also live near Allianz Field. My neighborhood actually experiences an uptick in just regular game day operation, trying to make the soccer games happen. They do things like put up barriers to direct street traffic. There's folks who make sure people can walk and travel safely, all that. So I understand that there will be likely a need for police presence in any number of events going forward. What I think our role is as a policymaking body is what are clear criteria for that? How are those defined in a way that's informed by what SPPD knows and what other departments know from executing large-scale events? But how are the costs then reasonable and fair and accessible and equitable? Right now, I'm concerned that there's just less definition and more discretion in a way that is actually it is canceling some of the most important events in our community. So I am personally thankful to you for being here today to explain and speak to this, and just know that my office, and I'm sure others, will be following up to learn some more and try to work on a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Yang and then Ms. Prince.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, and I'm glad we're talking about this because for the parade, the parades in my area have been canceled for a couple of years now, and I know that our district councils are very hopeful, very ambitious, and still committed to making them happen. But it is just the event security costs that are their biggest barriers around it. And so I feel, for me, like because I've been hearing about this, and I heard that even in other wards, like they've had their own events canceled for many years now too. I would really like to understand what is actually sparking the issues that we see now in event security costs. I know you mentioned we all have seen the different acts of violence that have occurred nationally, and we don't want that to happen at all. But I'm wondering what is actually triggering the changes that we see now, because is it the same issue? Have we experienced these issues like 10 years ago or like even 20 years ago? Having that understanding would be really helpful. So I'll ask that question first.
Perfect. Thank you, Councilmember Yang, and that's a very good question. So in 2019, actually prior to 2019, we hadn't necessarily been charging for the full cost of police services. So we were having officers out at events, whether it was a parade or other large events, that the city was basically, or the department was basically taking care of that cost. So in 2019, we messaged all of the event organizers that we knew that had previously done events and made sure that they know that moving forward, so starting in 2020, they were going to be charged for that full police cost. And we let them know based on that 2019 event what that new cost would be. And then quite frankly, COVID hit. So then there weren't a lot of events. So now we're starting to see those events start to come back. So it seems as though the cost is a lot greater, and the fact is that it's actually the fact that they're being charged for the real police costs that they should have been charged in the past, but they just weren't. So we're trying to make sure that there's a balance between having a safe event and making sure that the taxpayers aren't paying for that event. So there's a balance there. And that's why we try to work very specifically one-on-one with each event, because depending on the event, and again, a lot of it comes down to road closures, there's a lot of factors to it, but there are things that we can help do to mitigate those costs. There are some times where we can have volunteers at certain places, where we can have security, which is typically a lower cost. So to speak broadly, that's the difference that you're seeing. But again, it really is to make sure that we're recouping the actual costs of the police services at those events.
And if I may add to that, I think the other challenge was just there was just a lot of discretion in terms of what got subsidized and what didn't get subsidized. And so to be transparent, the change was charging everybody the real cost and not half for this one, a third for that one, and just being real clear about that. But I think that's what prompted the question about, can we create a fund or some resource? And I think Ms. Jalali hit the nail on the head when she talked about this as economic development, and are we using economic development resources, recognizing that these events do build community and build business in the community as well. But I think it really is an effort to be transparent with charges and not have, the skate ramp free.
Bull?
Cover the cost of the some of the Red Bull events, but then the other Rice Street Parade event is full price or what have you. And so just to be very consistent. And I also heard you say that hiring outside security is something that can be worked into a plan as well to help reduce some of those costs as well. But it's something that you do in concert with the police department. So we know this is a police coverage. We'll have this much outside security that will be doing this work, and maybe people who can cover intersections, but that is part of a bigger plan so that if there's an issue, the police department is connected to the bigger plan if there happens to be an incident. So it doesn't have to all be fully staffed by the police, but the plan is something that the police are part of.
That's exactly correct, Council President. Yep. So we based our staffing models off of best practices that we have seen across the nation. So it isn't just what we feel is important. So we do base it off of best practices, and those are kind of those numbers I was talking about before. And so we do work directly with the events to really figure out what does that staffing model look like. And it does look different event to event because every event is different. So. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just add another thing. I really appreciate what you mentioned about communication and that organizers for events should connect with you all ahead of time. I think that is important. I also feel like it doesn't fully cover the issues that the organizers are bringing up too, because the district councils in my area have had conversations with their officers, but in the end, it still didn't work out for them to host their event. And so I was going to ask something that, Council President, you touched on already, which is, are there other options for these organizations to actually come up with how they can make sure that their events are safe and secure as well for attendees? And they've mentioned, hey, we have never had any issues at our parades before. Everything's always ran really smoothly. So what other options do we have? And so I feel like what you mentioned, it covers a bit of that too. But do you have anything else you want to share about that question from them then?
I guess I just want to kind of reiterate the same point of we really need to look at the events on an event-by-event basis, and we really do want to have these events in the city, and we want to be a good partner and help these events take place. What I can say to the comment about they've been safe in the past, I'll go back to the event in Wisconsin, the parade that we had over there in, I forget the name of it, but Waukesha, Wisconsin, where they had a number of people killed and injured. Their event had been very safe prior to that. So our world is different, and we want to really make sure that we are doing everything we can to have a safe event. And at the end of the day, the city is the one giving these events their permit. And if something tragically were to go wrong at these events, we would have other bodies like FEMA and other agencies that would come in and take a very hard and careful look at how we plan that event. And if we aren't following best practices, that is not going to be good for the city. So that really is what we base that off of. Again, trying to balance the fact that we want to have these events, which is why we do try to mitigate the police costs, but there is a cost to having these events. So, thank you.
And definitely worth following up with the conversation about the event, and if there's a ways for it to evolve, or if there's ways for it to move forward, that makes sense. Councilmember Prince.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chief Murphy. I'm really glad we're having this conversation today, because I think what we've learned is that if the police were making decisions that in some cases they try to cover some of it, in some cases what we are learning here is that this is a policy issue that belongs with this body. And it's really hard. Ms. Yang and I, last year, whenever it was, that the Pain Harvest Festival couldn't happen because their police costs one year had been $3,000, which is what they were budgeting for, and after 2019, it was $11,000, and that is in particular a parade that when I have participated in it, it's multicultural, it's free, and so many neighbors turn out for it. And I feel like this is the kind of community engagement that our neighborhoods need to be able to do. In addition to, as you, Council President Brenmon said, and Council Member Jalali, it's economic development for our communities. And when we see a list like Little Mekong, the White Bear Avenue Parade, Grand Old Days, Highland Fest, the Pain Harvest Fest, it's extremely painful for us to just say, you know, because the money can't be raised by those grassroots organizations, that the events can't happen. So I think it is appropriate that we take this on. I think three of us on this council are board members with Visit St. Paul. I think there's an overlap with the work that we do with Visit St. Paul. And I think, you know, is it a cultural star matter that we could have groups apply the year before, or should we have a fund in Cultural Star for community festivals and figure out some kind of a formula for how that would work? But I definitely feel that the police did what they had to do, because you were having to make kind of, you were making policy decisions without the ability to really have the city have a policy. And so I hope that, I expect that we'll take this on as a group and figure out how to make it happen. We need those festivals back. They are so important to building community and a sense of engagement and safety, that we're all out together enjoying each other. So I'm glad that thanks, Stacy, for being on our agenda today, and to the rest of the council for taking on this issue.
To your point about Visit St. Paul, if you look at their brochure, the pictures are from the festivals.
Yeah,
So,
right, exactly.
Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. And Chief Murphy, thanks for coming to speak with us short notice. You know, in my years of doing IT, one of the things that we talk about when it comes to security is that security sometimes is not a priority, or you don't put enough money and resource into security, whether it's your firewall or a different application, until your organizations or company gets hacked and get held ransom for, money and from these hackers. And so, but by that time it's already too late, And so I think this is a good conversation that we're having here. And I think that what I'm hearing from here is that it shouldn't just be the responsibility of the police department, but the organizations and the cities coming together to, if this is about economic development, then what is our strategy around that, and how does the police play their role in providing security in that? And so I think it's promising, and the warmer months are coming up, and I got some really big parade in my ward. The Rondo Day Parade has been one that's been there for almost 30 years some now, and so look forward to having this conversation with your team and my colleague and the organizations.
Thank you.
Any other comments? And I think the messages, I appreciate the transparency and the clarity. I think that puts the ball squarely in our court to figure out how to navigate around it. I'm jotting down event liaison and PED and other ideas that we can work on together. But we have policy sessions every Wednesday at 10. And so to be continued. But thank you for coming in and getting the facts in front of us. As I said, clarifying the record, I think that was sounded like there was the report in the paper was kind of a very rough number that didn't take into account the details of the event, and so it has helped to look at it through this lens, and it sets our work out for us. So thank you very much. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Ms. Naker moves suspension of the rules. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion prevails.
Suspension item, Resolution 22-649 is before you, establishing Sunday, April 24th, 2022, as Zahua, Zhang, and Si Yang Day in St. Paul.
Great, thank you, and I apologize for bringing this in under suspension. It's important that we get it passed before this weekend. There's an important event, so I would move approval. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The resolution is is adopted.
And I apologize, we bumped ahead and missed item number 14. I do apologize for anybody who's here on that item.
Item number 14 is now before you, resolution and public hearing, which has been closed, 22-47. Ratifying the assessment for the 2021 Street Maintenance Service Program, seal coating street and/or alley, file number 215600, assessment number 215600. The public hearing was closed last week.
All right, and I believe Director Kershaw is here with an update.
Council President and council members, my name is Sean Kershaw. I'm the Director of Public Works. I know last time there was a particular question of a property on Yorkshire Drive that came up, and it was laid over until this week. We take these questions from the public really seriously about the nature of the work we do. There were two concerns brought up in this case. Was the seal coating done, and the condition of the roads, of the road itself? As to the seal coating being done, we had at least 2 inspectors go out and look at it who weren't there at the time. We have what we call AVL data, and it's data from the trucks that are involved that say the time and the place that they were there, and the AVL data showed that this activity did take place. I went out and personally looked, and you can tell that there's still aggregate in the gutter from the work that's done, that it's clear that a seal coating was done in front of that property. As to the condition, no street in St. Paul, or most streets aren't perfect. I would call this street condition very, very good. And I had no concerns about the condition of the street itself.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. And I know last week we had a bit of a confusion. We used to have our public hearings at 5:30, and we've switched our schedule to 3:30. So typically our Public Works team is here and ready to rock and roll, and I know that going forward you will be as well, but there was a little, last week was quite a week, and we appreciate you being here today to clarify. Mr. Tolbert, any follow-up on that? Nope. Okay, I will take a motion to approve. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
Thank you.
7 in favor, none opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 15 is now before you for final adoption. Ordinance 22-17, granting the application of Nimco Limited to rezone property at 597 7th Street East from I-1 Light Industrial to T2 Traditional Neighborhood, and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map.
All right, Councilmember Prince.
Thank you. I am pursuing a few questions on this one, and I'd like to lay it over for 1 week.
All right, Councilmember Prince is moving a 1 week layover for some clarification. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The ordinance is laid over for a week. Item number 16 is before you for your first reading. Ordinance 22-18, amending Section 160.04 of the Legislative Code to add Juneteenth to parking meter holidays.
All right, this is our first reading and usually where we would get a staff report, although I believe this is fairly straightforward. Do anyone have questions or need a staff report on this item? If not, we'll lay it over for next week public hearing.
The ordinance is laid over to April 27th for second reading and public hearing. Item number 17 is now before you for a public hearing. That is Resolution 22-24, amending the financing and spending plans in the Department of Public Works capital budget to close out 2014 projects with 880 bond funding.
All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to testify on this item? Seeing none, Mr. Tao moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 18 is now before you for a public hearing. Resolution 22-89, approving the application of University of St. Thomas for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on May 21st and 22nd, 2022 at 2115 Summit Avenue or O'Shaughnessy Stadium.
Right, sounds like graduation's coming up on us. Ms. Jalali, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Jalali moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 19 is now before you. Public hearing 22-90, approving the application of Podium Sports Marketing for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on May 1st, 2022 at Upper Landing Park.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 20 is now before you. Public hearing 22-91, approving the application of Anderson Race Management for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on May 21st, 2022 at 200 Dr. Eustace O'Hage Boulevard, Harriet Island Regional Park, and Kelly's Landing.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 21 is now before you, public hearing 22-97, amending the financing and spending plans in the fire department in the amount of $10,000 and $10,922.36 for the Minnesota Task Force 1 team reimbursement from the city of Edina.
Thank you. And this is an item before us for a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, I will move approval, as always, when we take money from the city of Edina. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The public hearing is closed. And the motion of intent is the appeal. Whoa, sorry, skipped the line there. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 22 is now before you. Item 22-1, a public hearing to consider the appeal of George and Sharon Pfeiffer to a Heritage Preservation Commission decision at 525 Holly Avenue in the Historic Hill Heritage District.
And on this item, I believe we have a staff report. Welcome.
Council President, council members, I'm George Gause. I'm the supervisor of the Heritage Preservation Program. The owners of 525 Holly received an approval from the Heritage Preservation Commission on March 7th, 2022 to construct an accessory dwelling unit for the rear of their property with access to the alley. The ADU is 1.5 stories with a 2-car garage and second-story living space, and it will access the alley. The HPC approved the ADU because they felt that it met legislative code standards for the accessory structures, which is section 74.64A, general principles, and section 74.65F, site considerations. The HPC also felt that the ADU met the Secretary of the Interior standards, which state each property shall be recognized as a physical record of its time, place, and use. The Secretary of the Interior standards are used as a basis for the Heritage Preservation Legislative Code, which is Chapter 73 and 74. The architect of the ADU had the proposal reviewed by city zoning staff. They found that the proposal meets the zoning code with no variances required. The HPC approved the new ADU as being the approval of the new ADU has been appealed by neighbors who reside at 529 Holly Avenue, which is right next door to the property. The appellant's complaint is that the HPC did not consider all the design guidelines. The ADU's mass and scale within 3 feet of their property creates a negative sense of enclosure. The roof and deck are inconsistent with the area, and the ADU is visible from Holly Avenue. The guidelines that address accessory structures were considered by the HPC. Most of the guidelines for new construction do focus on residential structures, so we only considered a couple of guidelines previously mentioned. The setback of 3 feet meets the zoning code for the city. The HPC felt the design is reminiscent of what was on the site previously while having visual cues back to the main structure, and it is also a product of its own time. The HPC did not believe the ADU would negatively impact the historic district. Any questions?
Advice from our city attorney here in terms of order of testimony today. Sounds like Ms. Prince has a question. Were there other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Gause, I read the file pretty carefully, and one question I had was whether there was a possibility that the ADU could be shifted on the site so that it wouldn't wouldn't be as close to that lot line. And I think there was an issue about the roof ridge being possibly changed to better alleviate the impacts on the neighboring property. And I just wondered if you could address either of those, if either of those are things that could be done and still get HPC approval.
Well, the HPC they're always excited about ADUs. It's a responsible way of adding density to the city and meets the comprehensive plan. When we see something that comes in that meets the zoning code setback, we really don't get further than that. It's up to the owner if they decide they want to move something. I believe there is room on the lot if they wanted to move it, but we do leave it up to them. The roof line was changed from one direction to the other so that more sun would be into the alley, and it would create a living space, a sloped area towards the house for the ADU. So,
Okay, thank you.
And just because it's been a while, I think that we've had a matter like this before us, and that's why I was referring to our city attorney, but we're recalling that we are looking at an appeal. We will need to hear testimony about how the HPC erred in order to grant the appeal, and so we should keep our testimony to the error of the HPC and not go too far out of those boundaries. So that was my PSA, and I'll turn things over to you, Mr. Tao.
Thank you. I'm just curious, do you have any diagram for us to look at, just for me to get a visual of the design?
I do. So I have, this is the view from the park of the ADU and the sloped roof in question.
The 3 feet in questions is, I'm assuming from my screen, is to the right. That.
And then I have a comparison of what's existing on the lot today and what's proposed for the lot. And then this will be the view from the alley of the ADU.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there other questions? All right, thank you, and don't go too far away. We may have questions. And just again, a reminder that we are looking for testimony about how the HPC erred in its decision. And so we will call the appellant if they'd like to come up and make that case.
Going to use the overhead. Can you hear me okay?
Not when you're walking up, but if you just center yourself between the two microphones,
Okay.
we should hear you fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, and just
All right.
introduce yourself, let us know where you live, and then we will we'll go through your testimony.
Sorry. I am Sharon Pfeiffer, and I live at 529 Holly. And my husband, George Pfeiffer, and myself, thank you very much for this opportunity to request a reconsideration of the issuance of the certificate of appropriateness that was issued by the HPC on the accessory dwelling unit next door to us. We have lived at 529 Holly for 36 years, and in that time, the garage next door to us has always been exactly as it is today, 600 square feet. It was the largest structure on the historic alley until 10 years ago, and a very large garage was made to the west of our property. But I'd like to, there were 4 design areas that if I can have some, I don't know if I have to turn something on or what here.
No, if you just put, if you look to your, if you just do that, there's a camera
I
hidden
can't
up
see
in
it.
the,
Can you see it okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't dare look around too much because I get dizzy. We just hear about it in a second. But the issues that we had concerns with were these 4 areas: the massiveness of the accessory dwelling unit, its relative scale, which is quite a bit larger actually than most of the other garages.
Could you turn the photograph you just turned on, could you or put it on, can you just orient it the same way as the paper you have on the, actually move the picture the way the paper was.
I can't see above me, so this one I want to just cover, so like that?
Oh.
Like this?
Oh, I see.
Does that work?
Yes.
Okay, so the 4 issue areas that we commented on when we did the review of the project early in January, February, and then we also are appealing, have to do with the massiveness of the ADU structure, its relative scale compared to other garages across the alley and our own garage, and other structures in the alley as well. The issue of setback in the northwest corner of 525 Holly, which I'll talk about more in just a second, and also then the roof shape, and the height of the garage, which is going to be 26 feet tall, which is quite a bit taller than it is currently by a little over 6 feet. And then also there's a very large 170 square foot exterior porch at 10 feet off the ground. So if we look at the, and I hope you can see this, maybe that is, can you see that okay?
Well,
Can you turn it, rotate it to the left? There we go. Yeah.
Like this?
All right.
and
Yes,
just
yes, okay, there you go.
put it right in the middle of the square. There you go.
Needs
Thank
some
you.
practice. All right, and so if you compare the existing garage, which is 600 square feet, with the new structure, depending on which plans I look at from Strom Architects, they seem to vary time by time, but the new ADU is going to either be 56% or 83% larger than the current garage already on the property. And the setback is going to be much closer, and the ADU is also going to be much taller. And why is that an issue for me? Well, we have 4 things that we'd like to first point out, and that is that we are not opposed to the construction of the ADU. The second thing is that we are asking of those 4 design areas to pay particular attention to the corner setback, which is now 3 feet, and we'd like to have that increased. Also, and you might ask, why do we want to have that increase? And one of the reasons is because this 400 square foot organic garden in our fenced-in backyard is an area that I have been using for the past 4 years for physical therapy, to be able to get my mind and my body to re-coordinate. I was hit by a car on Grand Avenue and suffered a traumatic brain injury 4 years ago, and I still have positional vertigo, and I'm still recovering and trying to work in a safe space where my husband can watch me when I'm outside in case I fall or suffer another seizure. So this garden space for me is very important, and I lost a garden on the west side of the property 10 years ago when a very large structure, almost as large as the one to be built, was built. It completely shaded out the garden there, so I moved it to this corner of the property. Then another point for you to consider is that the,
I do want to make sure that you get to any points about any errors of the HPC. We understand that
all right,
preferences are, and we. Yep.
Yes, in particular, the guidance does have 11 guidelines for the Historic Hill District, and we felt that one was really dramatically overlooked. I'm going to read to you one of the guidance points is to pay attention to design effects on the character of surrounding structures and areas. And we are right next door, and that food space that is going to be shaded out is right next door. So we're just asking for a setback. And we have some options that you might like to consider to adjust the setback from 3 feet and to increase it. And the first of these is that you can use Ordinance 63.501. And I have to read this because it's an odd wording, but it says that a rear yard adjoining a side yard, the setback from an interior lot line must be a distance equal to the minimum side yard of the principal structure, which is the house. And the west side yard of 525 Holly is 5 feet. All right, it's 5 feet from their house to the property line. The second thing that you might like to consider is that Section 63.501D says that an accessory building setback must be at least 3 feet, which it is, but it can be waived by a maintenance agreement to satisfy adequate sunlight to the adjacent property, which is what we're seeking. And then lastly, the third option is to use a stated flexibility in the Historic Hill District guidelines themselves and have that 7-foot extension divided 3.5 feet to the east side, 3.5 to the west side of the existing structure. So that is more, it retains the center point of the backyard of 525 Holly. So those are some options that I could think of that might help resolve this issue, to simply be able to continue to use that space for my physical therapy and for the organic produce that we produce there. We are vegetarians and we rely on that garden very heavily for 5 months. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, so as I mentioned a few times, and I apologize, we're a little out of the practice on these particular hearings, but I wonder if, Mr. Gause, could you just, is there anything that we just heard that was an error in the findings of the HPC? I definitely understand preferences were expressed, and I appreciate that, but I just want to understand what we're looking at and what has been presented.
Right. Council President, members of council, when the issue came up over sunlight, we checked with the zoning staff and to make sure that how sunlight and air is interpreted through zoning code. It definitely was determined it's not the purview of the HPC, it's the purview of the Planning Commission or Board of Zoning Appeals. And since there would be no variance needed for this property, they're meeting the zoning codes, therefore zoning code is followed, so there's not an issue with sunlight. So,
okay. All right, thank you for clarifying. And again, we may have more questions, but just trying to make sure we know what's in front of us and what's specifically that we're going to be voting on today. So we've heard from the appellant. If there's anyone here who'd like to speak in support or opposition to this item, you may come up and share your thoughts. If you didn't do this, Ms. Pfeiffer, could you sign in at the ledger, or maybe you did that? Okay, great. Is there anyone here to testify on this item? No? But it's okay. Let's just see if there's any other testimony before we move on. Is there anyone else here to testify?
Hi.
Hi.
I didn't sign up to testify. I'm Zinzi. This is Tim. We live at 525 Holly. This is our garage. We're neighbors of Sharon's. And so we're happy to, I guess, answer any questions. I don't know that there's much we can add besides George's expertise on the plans themselves, except that, our goal is to keep this garage within the zoning code as much as possible, and so that's exactly what the plans are.
Okay, great. Ms. Prince, you have a question for the homeowners?
Yeah. I'm wondering, so often in these situations, the issues come down to working with neighbors working together. And I'm just wondering, the HPC didn't weigh in on how it should be positioned. You didn't require variances. And I'm just wondering if you have any flexibility in terms of being able to move the project a few feet over or anything like that. I mean, it just, we cannot make that happen, but neighbors working together can often resolve these issues. And I think Ms. Pfeiffer has made a strong case for the impact of light on her yard. So that's my question. Do you have the flexibility to move it a few feet in one direction?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah, are you just encouraging them to work with the neighbors?
Well, or asking if.
Okay, because.
I'll go ahead and answer. We have been trying to work with Sharon and George for the last many months, reaching out to them about our plans as they've evolved, and we understand their concerns. The garage will simply be closer to their property than it is today. We're particularly empathetic to the concerns around the garden. Sharon has actually been a great resource to us as we have planted our own garden in that space. She's an expert gardener. Every square inch of her property is a beautiful garden. And so to that, so I guess I'll come back to that point. In terms of our property and where else we could place the garage, the reason we've chosen to place it where it is because centering it more in the middle of the property would mean dividing up the usable space in our yard. And so we're actually going to we're hoping to place the garage in the exact same place that Sharon and George's garage is, which is kind of tucked into the back corner so that you can use the rest of the yard as one space. It also makes, because we're adding this ADU, this small apartment, it makes it a little more private. It'll be tucked behind our house rather than, we have the Holly Tot Lot, which is a small playground on the other side of us. So moving the ADU closer to the playground would just make it a little more visible, make the windows more open to the public. And so having it as sort of tucked away into the property as possible is the most comfortable thing from an apartment perspective. I'm also hopeful that the impact on Sharon's garden will be manageable. We actually have raised beds in with the exact same amount of shade as Sharon's raised beds will have when this new building is built. And we're able to have an incredible crop of vegetables there. We were able to last summer with the amount of sun that we got, which will be the same amount of sun that she gets in the future. So we absolutely understand her concerns and have had many conversations about this, and we'll continue to as neighbors. But hopefully that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. We appreciate your work in being a good neighbor and having these conversations. Is there anyone else here to testify on this item? All right. If not, Mr. Tao moves to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion prevails. Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. So I just want to, and Ms. Pfeiffer, thanks for coming down here to testify and share us your concern. What I hear is, and looking through the case notes is, and today I hear your, the options that you provided and preference and how you like it. And I think Ms. Prince, Councilmember Prince made a great point about neighbors working with each other. But I still can't see evidence here that the HPC erred. So very difficult to grant appeal when the facts doesn't support that the HPC error. What I do want to say is that you and George being here in St. Paul and at 529 for 36 years, and that's a really long time, and you build your life in St. Paul and in that neighborhood. It's a beautiful place to live and to grow a family. And that's why a lot of people want to live here in St. Paul. And, and I'm really proud that you like gardening and that you're really good at it. I try to garden myself. I don't think I'm as good as you and many other folks, so I understand the importance of having that tranquility space to be, to leave the world behind and just to be in a world of your own in your garden. That's how I feel when I'm in my garden. And so I'm sorry, but I just can't grant the appeal because I don't see any error in the HPC's finding. And so I appreciate you coming down here, and I empathize with you, but I am going to move to deny the appeal.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Tao. And I do appreciate, as we mentioned earlier, we are looking for an error in the HPC's decision, and we recognize that there's lots of positions and differing opinions, and change is hard. But we're looking for that error, and you do not see the error, and your motion is to deny the appeal. So there's a motion to deny the appeal in front of us. Is there discussion on Mr. Tao's motion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The public hearing is closed, and the motion of intent is the appeal is denied. Item 23 is now before you, APC 22-1, a public hearing to consider the appeal of Dayton's Bluff District Council to a decision of the Planning Commission approving a reestablishment of non-conforming use for Elite Auto Sales, LLC, at 847 Hudson Road.
I'll tell you who's not out of practice. Mr. Dermody, you got yourself right up there and you're ready to go. So staff report, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thanks, Council President, Council members, Bill Dermody, staff with the Department of Planning and Economic Development. Similar to the last case, this is the question of whether a commission erred. So we have that question before you. I want to give you a little bit of background information, and then we'll hear from other folks about this. 847 Hudson Road is the site, and I'll use this document camera because it's a little quicker than setting up the computer since this is working today. Subject site is at this strange four-way intersection right up against I-94 in Dayton's Bluff. Hudson Road is basically a frontage road for I-94, and then Plum and Bates connect here. I don't think it's key to this case, but incidentally, this intersection will be closed off when Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit gets constructed in the next few years. Construction begins later this year for that. It's a triangular lot of about 4,800 square feet. And this is what it looks like from the street. It's originally built as a gas station in the 1920s, almost 100 years old. It was then used for auto repair for some time, and for about the last 20 years, it has been vacant. You can see there are multiple curb cuts off of both sides of this site, and it's a relatively small lot. Planning Commission approved this reestablishment of non-conforming use, which is something you can do in the St. Paul zoning code, to bring back a use that's not normally allowed. So it's zoned RT1, which is a residential district, and since it had been used for auto repair and a fuel station for such a long time, it was eligible to for this application for auto sales, and the applicant wanted to do auto sales for 5 vehicles on the site, a small dealership there. Planning Commission approved that with 6 conditions, including 2 that I'll highlight: that there should be no auto repair conducted on the site, and also that there be no vehicles associated with the use parked on adjacent streets besides those for short-term customer use. No employee or for sale vehicles may be parked on the adjacent streets. And they did that to try to ensure that there would not be a negative neighborhood impact. These are the key findings. There are other findings besides these, but these are the key findings that you will want to look at in considering this appeal. Finding number 3 is that the proposed use will not be detrimental to the existing character of development in the immediate neighborhood or endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare. I would say that the District Council's appeal points heavily at this issue, so you'll want to pay attention to that. Planning Commission and staff had found that finding 3 was met. And then also finding 4, the proposed use is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And there are, the general comprehensive plan and several addenda are quoted in that finding, but the key one is that the Gold Line station area plans call for a pedestrian orientation in any new development or redevelopment. And the original staff recommendation on this was that this finding was not met. Staff had actually recommended denial because auto sales is not a pedestrian-oriented use. It's not allowed in the traditional neighborhood districts in the city. But Planning Commission felt differently because, in their opinion, this is not really a development or a redevelopment. It is just a reuse of an existing building. So the appeal filed by Dayton's Bluff Community Council had 4 points to make. 1, they wanted to point out that vehicular access is within 60 feet of an intersection, which is not normally allowed, although it can be allowed through a reestablishment permit like this. The minimum lot size for auto sales is 15,000 square feet generally, and what we have here is about 4,800, so much less than that. They point out that the site has had multiple conditional use permits or other permits, but no progress. It's been vacant anyway for 20 years. And they also make some allegations about property maintenance on this site being an issue. So that's the appeal before you. Planning Commission, again, approved this, and Dayton's Bluff would like you to overturn that decision.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Dermody? All right. Thank you for your report. All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item?
I have something to say.
Am I hearing?
Yes, I have something to say, please.
All right, if you could just hold on one moment. We have someone in the chamber who's going to testify, and then we'll move to your online testimony or your phone call. Welcome.
Yes, excuse me.
Okay, no problem.
Hi, my name is Carrie Motarjimi, and I am the owner of 847 Hudson. Thank you for the opportunity to talk, as I'm here today to ask you to kindly move forward with the approval of the non-conditional use for auto sales. I appreciate the time to address the concerns brought forward in this appeal. The first concern was having access within 60 feet of an intersection. All current entrances are existing and have been there for many years. I will be removing one of the entrances that is closest to the intersection, and the only entrance that I plan on having will be 84 feet from the intersection. This is already conditionally approved with zoning, and this should be able to remove the first concern. The second issue is with the minimum property square footage. There has already been value seen by this committee, by this committee in the city because it has been approved twice for auto sales. Also, I am not changing anything. I would just be running a small lot with a max of 5 cars at a time. The third issue is that there have been 3 cups with no progress. I have only been part of one of the cups. I purchased the building because it was already an approved cup for auto sales, and I started working on it. I had everything done and the contractors lined up when I found out that I had to start over. However, I am here today and completely ready and wanting nothing more than to get this property up and running and start adding to the community and city instead of having a vacant lot. The last concern that was brought forward was that I had not taken care of the property and it's not in the best interest of the community. I strongly disagree with this statement, as I have taken care of the property. The 2 violations brought forth by Dayton's Bluff were for snow and ice removal. I have always had that professionally hired out. The violations were taken care of by the city within 24 hours because it's a Category 3 vacant building. And I am also unable to make any improvements or work until this issue is resolved. Lastly, my main goal is to add to the surrounding community and neighborhood by offering affordable, well-inspected cars without all the high markup that larger auto dealerships have. I strongly believe that this would be a beneficial business to the neighborhood and city. In closing, it has been approved twice as an auto sales business. I strongly believe the best use is as an auto business. I am kindly asking you to move forward with the approval of the non-conditional use. I have all the resources and people in place to get this building ready and running successfully. Please help me bring this property back to life and a great business to the city and community. Thank you for your time. I appreciate and truly hope that you will let me move forward with a non-conditional use for auto sales.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. And just to my colleagues, we've been giving people in public hearings 2 minutes to speak, but on these items of with zoning, we're extending the appellant or the landowner 5. So we're looking at the timer, and I know people are like, we're just going long, but you're well within the time frame. So thank you for your testimony. I appreciate hearing from you. I know there's somebody else on the phone line. Is there anyone else here to speak to this item in the chambers? Come on up. Please come up.
Hi, my name is Chuck Hanna. I'm here representing the Dayton's Bluff District Council and the neighbors of the immediate neighbors to 847 Hudson. The concerns came to us from the neighbors, specifically along Bates Avenue is where we first heard about the request for a conditional use permit. The concern with the neighbors is putting in a business that they don't feel is appropriate for the neighborhood. We cited the issues of the 15,000 square feet as a normal use. This is less than a third of that size for the conditional use. The curb cuts and the building conditions, we know that can be taken care of and amended, so we're not too concerned about that. The biggest issue we have is that type of business going into that neighborhood as it stands right now. People are trying to improve their homes, they're trying to work on there, and they feel like this is going to be a detriment to go in and put a small used car lot in that neighborhood. It has been twice staff has recommended not to pass the CUPs, but they have still passed through the commission. That was in 2017 and 2022. I'm trying to keep it under 2 minutes. So staff has recommended twice for various reasons not to pass it. And I think Bill brought that up, what those reasons were. And we just don't feel like it's an appropriate use for that building in that neighborhood. There could be other uses. We're not opposed to other uses, just that particular use for that zoning. It was rezoned to RT1 back in 1999, I believe. And it has been, we'd be fine if we could keep a use in that or a small office, something along that line.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Jalali, did you have a question?
Sorry, it's for staff later.
Okay,
I'm
for
getting
staff.
in line.
Okay. Okay, great. And I know that there is still one person that wants to testify on the phone. I don't know who it is. I'm looking for a gatekeeper on the phones, just so we have some introduction as to who's here to testify.
Thank you, President Bridmoen and Council. We do have one testifier online for line 23 APC 22-1, Mr. Samuel Soldier Beckman. You will have 2 to 5 minutes to testify. Please press *6 to unmute yourself to begin your testimony, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks for waiting.
I am Samuel Soldier Beckman. I am the direct neighbor to 847 Hudson Road, the property being considered for a used car sales lot. I have lived here for 10 years, where it has been vacant for the entire time. Ms. Mortergemi is a liar. My first and only meeting with her was when she was removing cars she had illegally parked there. At that time, she gave me, her neighbor, a false identity. That was 2019, and we have not seen her since. She gave you an appeal letter with a sob story about how she filed for building permits multiple times without response. We spoke to the historical preservation supervisor, and the owner has not contacted them and has not filed any application to complete work on the building. At best, she doesn't know how to properly file paperwork. At worst, she is deliberately trying to circumvent proper routes for historical districts. The building has been falling apart, deteriorating even more than before she gained ownership. There is no electricity running to the building, and the phony security cameras are hanging off their own wires. Windows are boarded up or just broken. The very walls made from cinder block are crumbling. They neglect their lawn and snow responsibilities. Every winter, we have to remove snow from their sidewalks, as have others, because the owners do not do it. The owner completely neglects all upkeep responsibilities. She has no interest in our community's well-being. Our neighborhood council disagrees with allowing the NCU permit. I encourage you to strongly consider their submissions, which identifies how this is not in the best interest of the neighborhood. Putting this used car lot in our residential, family-oriented neighborhood would attract crime, nuisance, and ultimately, no one in this neighborhood wants it here. She came into the neighborhood on bad faith, and she made a bad investment. Nobody wants her business here. A vacant lot is worse than a business owner who has no regard for the community. We know our neighbors, and she is not our neighbor. She is lying to you. More than that, I did not know I had more than 2 minutes.
You don't. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Council President Bryn Mawin and Council. There's no additional testifiers.
Thank you. And thank you for your help on that item. All right, is there anyone else here to testify on this item? Seeing none, Ms. Prince moves to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion prevails. Ms. Jalali, raise your hand if you had a question for staff. Could Mr. Dermody please join us again?
Thank you. Mr. Dermody, my question is about, there's some comments in the record that are alleging that this project or this proposal is somehow interfering with the Gold Line, and I'm just trying to understand what the actual reality is. Are you aware of that, and can you speak to that?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Jalali, I'm not aware of any conflict with the Gold Line project. I'm also working with Metro Transit on the Gold Line project, and they are aware that there's some interest in reusing this building, and they have construction plans that, to my knowledge, do not conflict with anything that is being proposed for this property.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions for staff? Ms. Prince.
However, Mr. Dermody, to that point, the station area plan calls for pedestrian-oriented uses, which this would not be.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Prince, that is what the Gold Line station area plans call for. Planning Commission, however, said that this is not a development or redevelopment, and that the policy applies to developments and redevelopments.
Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. Mr. Dermody, I was struggling with that because it's a vacant lot. So although what is being applied for here is a reestablishment of a non-conforming use,
it's not a vacant lot.
But isn't the plan to redevelop the building into the auto use site? I mean, it's not, the current structure is not what's going to be used, right?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Naker, the proposal is to use the existing structure.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was reading a staff report that talked about the current site as a vacant lot, so.
Sorry about that.
Maybe wrong staff report. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Tolbert is suggesting it is in the vacant building program, perhaps, but the lot.
Its existing land use is vacant. Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Dermody? I did have one. How long has this current owner owned the property?
Council President Bren Moen, that would have been an easier one to answer before the public hearing was closed. But I believe it was not in her hands in 2017 when Fred Nias got this approval. I think it was about 2019 when the property changed hands.
Okay. And I recall hearing this item previously, so that's why I'm trying to understand. So you said from 2019 to now through COVID. Okay. Other questions for Mr. Dermody? Ms. Jalali.
Well, I don't know. It's not a question. It was more of a, I found in the Planning Commission packet where you referenced that the Planning Commission says the pedestrian orientation use is for new redevelopment or development, and it acknowledges what you said. So I just wanted to say, yes, in real time that I find what you're referencing. Thank you for explaining that, and I found it where it's listed. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Ms. Prince.
Thank you. I thank Ms. Motorjemi for coming down and letting us know about her proposed business. And I thank the Dayton's Bluff, Mr. Hanna for coming from the Dayton's Bluff Community Council to explain the rationale for their appeal. I believe that the Planning Commission erred in a number of ways. First of all, they have revived non-conforming use that had terminated over a decade ago. The building had not been used for any kind of car use. Well, I believe it goes all the way back to 1999, This council did approve a conditional use permit in 2017 for an auto dealership, a small, similar to this one. There was a failure for that to move forward. Nothing's happened at this property for 2 years, and it is a non-conforming use. I mean, they expire after 1 year. So there's one way, but the auto-oriented uses are not part of the overall vision for this area under the 2009 District 4 plan, which contemplates reuse of the building for an RT1 purpose. Also, as Mr. Dermody stated, under the 2015 Gold Line Area Station Plan, pedestrian-oriented uses are contemplated for this area. I also believe that the commission erred in the distinguishing between reuse and redevelopment. This is a revival of a non-conforming use that expired. Staff, in its staff report, staff also noted that auto sales are usually limited to B3 and IT and I2 industrial districts with a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet, and noted that in order to prevent neighborhood detriment on this small 5,000 square feet triangular setting, that what we're effectively doing is that we're going to be requiring this residential neighborhood to basically monitor this ongoing business. This is not a residential use. It's not a pedestrian-oriented use, and I would uphold the findings of the staff report in noting that the Planning Commission erred.
Thanks. Ms. Jalali.
So could I just get a clarification of what the staff recommendation was in this instance, or is there not a staff recommendation we're being asked to decide?
Council President, council members, the question, of course, is whether the Planning Commission erred. Staff had recommended denial based on finding 4 not being met, and I think I heard Councilmember Prince echo that staff recommendation. Planning Commission felt that all the findings were met, including that one.
What was?
Mr. Tolbert had a follow-up question, Mr. Dermody, and then Ms. Naker.
So what's the error? Just so what is the error?
I'm sorry, could you?
What is the error?
What is the error? That's up to the council to decide. And I heard a few things from Councilmember Prince.
Yeah, maybe if you can reiterate what Ms. Prince said, or Ms. Prince, if you can iterate what is the error. I'm not sure that was clear.
The error, well, findings 3 and 4 are not met, and the Planning Commission determined that all the findings were met.
Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I would agree and support Councilmember Prince's notion. I think that it's a distinction without a difference to talk about redevelopment versus development versus the new establishment of a use that has expired. I think it's clear that the point of the language there is to say we shouldn't have auto-oriented uses near mass transit. And I also agree that the difficulty of the damage to the neighborhood is implicit in the fact that this continuing re-upping of this use has failed to yield a productive property, and that continued vacancy is detrimental to the neighborhood. So I would support the motion.
I just would like to chime in and say this is challenging for me. I understand the points that are being made, and I think it's it could go either way. And I would actually request a layover on this item simply because I'm hearing an entrepreneur, business owner who purchased the property with an expired CUP, but an understanding that they could move forward with a small auto dealership in the area. It's a really interesting location, but I feel like the neighborhood keeps denying. But there is still an opportunity for somebody to come in and develop. And I'm also just troubled that somebody would come to testify and repeatedly call a person a liar, and the vitriol is just not sitting well with me. I'd like to understand what the facts are around this before we vote on this, because I do understand. I represent an area that has an overabundance of small auto dealerships, and so I understand the challenge, but I also feel like we continue to throw up barriers for the development of this particular property, and to judge it being vacant during COVID is challenging for me. So I would just request a week to get an opportunity to wrap my head around this. I know we had asked about it this morning when we checked in, and I just don't feel like I understand it well enough. So I would look to you, Ms. Prince, for a 1 week layover, if that would be acceptable. Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. I really appreciate this discussion, and I am genuinely not sure how I would vote right now, and I just am being honest about that, because I think that there's some distinctions that I just need time with to understand in the language and the back and forth of what has happened. I've found the explanations to date valuable, but also really personally, I want to, as we all do and as we are called to, base this decision on the facts at hand and how that relates to our codes that we have to follow in a decision like this, and the evidence we have to bring, as opposed to like how people feel about a given use in their neighborhood. And I'm worried that I'm not able to do that yet well, just because I'm still understanding it. So just kind of my version of what you're saying, and would be very grateful and appreciate the arguments that you've made as well, Councilmember Prince, but more time to absorb them would help me personally. So I respect what the council decides to do, but that would be my request as well.
All right, so there's a request for a 1 week layover, and Ms. Jalali is in support as well. Ms. Prince seemed all right with that. Any further discussion on the request for a 1 week layover? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The motion is laid over for 1 week. Legislative hearing consent agenda items 24 through 33 are before you for your approval.
Good afternoon, Ms. Mormont.
Good afternoon, Council President Brenmoen. I'm unaware of anyone here to testify before you for a legislative hearing item.
All right. So we're looking at items 24 through 33. If there's anyone here to testify on these items, now is your opportunity. Seeing none, Ms. Yang moves to close the public hearing and approve as amended. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, none opposed. The public hearings are closed and the consent agenda is adopted.
As amended.
As amended. Wonderful. And before we adjourn, is there any announcements or introductions that need to be made? Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I just want to thank my two sons, Whitman and Fitzgerald, for coming today and being willing to sit so quietly without any electronics for the last 2 hours.
What? No electronics even? Wow. Bravo. Do you guys just want to come up to the front and just say your names, or I think it'd be nice to get you on one of the 5 TV cameras. And you don't even have to adjust the microphones, just come right a little bit further over and just introduce yourself and maybe something you like about St. Paul.
I'm Fitz, and I like the Science Museum.
Yes.
I'm Whitman, and I love how we are right near the 3rd longest river in the world in St. Paul.
Do you mind if I just ask you if you happen to know how to spell the name of that river? That 3rd longest river. Anyone?
MISSISSIPPI.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here tonight. We appreciate having you here, sitting patiently and listening to us debate. We appreciate you. Have to have you back sometime, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for being here.
Now go sit down.
Any other announcements? Ms. Yang.
Thank you. Yeah, I have 2 announcements. This Friday's Earth Day, and what good timing, because Saturday is the St. Paul City-wide spring cleanup from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And you can go on the city website, look up St. Paul Citywide Spring Cleanup to get all of the different locations on where you can stop by to pick up a bag and go with a partner or a team to pick up trash and litter all across our city. And then in addition to that, I wanted to share really exciting news from our St. Paul Public Libraries about open houses that they're doing for 3 libraries that we like to get renovated in St. Paul here. And they're open houses so that people can review updated design concepts and get feedback from the community. And it's for Hamlin Midway, Hayden Heights, and the Riverview Library. So for Hayden Heights, we're starting 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. this Saturday at the Hayden Heights Library, and then the open house at the Hamlin Midway Library is from 3 to 5 p.m. this Saturday. And then, I missed the first one, which is the Riverview Library, happening this Saturday, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So people can literally hop from each open house to the next one if they want to, all on Saturday as well. So it's a packed weekend.
Grab a garbage bag, stop at the parks, stop at the libraries. It's a lot, but it's worth it. Right? That is what Mr. Lally will be doing. Any other?
And it's Record Store Day.
And it's Record Store Day, but I do, thanks for underscoring. I know that some people have been like, why isn't the park in my neighborhood the one being cleaned up? And there are lots of parks, probably over 100, maybe 150 when you count the little triangles and stuff, and you can clean them up anytime. No one is stopping you, nobody. However, for these events, we're staffed up, we have volunteers, and we have materials there to do it. But if you're interested in cleaning up a park or organizing a cleanup event, we will help you contact us, and we can clean up those little parks, the little side parks, the ones that you feel like aren't getting enough attention. We're not trying to pick favorites. We do switch around, but it takes some effort to put the volunteers and staff at those locations. So don't feel left out if your park's not on the list. All right, we look forward to seeing you this weekend. If there's nothing else to come before us, we're adjourned.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Oh my gosh.
Hi, my name is Hali. I'm here with the City of St. Paul's Food Too Good to Waste program. We're here with the Butter Tin to learn how they're preventing food waste.
The Butter Tin reduces food waste by recycling and composting.